Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. This webinar is being presented by Clean Energy Group. Our topic for the webinar today is an assessment of equity in Massachusetts energy storage programs. And we've got an exciting panel of guest speakers with us today, but before that, I'd like to go over a few webinar logistics. We are using a new updated version of GoToWebinar, so if you have any feedback for us, please let us know in our post-webinar survey. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so your webcam and microphone are disabled. If you'd like to submit questions and comments, please do so via the questions panel, and we encourage you to do so throughout the webinar rather than waiting until the end. Speaker bios are available in the materials section, and automated captions are available. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. We'll email you a webinar recording within 48 hours, and it will be posted on the Clean Energy Group website at cleanegroup.org/webinars. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to our host for today's webinar, my colleague Todd Olinsky-Paul.
Great, thanks very much, and welcome to the webinar, everybody. So I'm going to do a very brief intros explaining who we are and who the speakers are and what the topic is, and then I will pass it over to our speakers. If you have questions or comments, please enter those as you think of them. Don't wait till the end. That gives me time to kind of read through them and figure out, which ones could be combined or which ones are, more appropriate or less appropriate for the material. And then I can sort of make the question and discussion section a little more useful and interesting for everybody. So without further ado, I want to start by introducing Clean Energy Group. We're a nonprofit. We're located in Vermont. We work with states, municipalities, NGOs, utilities, and other organizations across the country on clean energy. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is on our new report. Just came out in September, end of September. And as Zareen mentioned, it's an assessment of 3 programs in Massachusetts that support the deployment of energy storage in the state. And specifically, we're looking at the equity components and the equity participation in those 3 programs. And this report was written by the Applied Economics Clinic. We have somebody, one of the lead, the lead author here to present today. We contract quite frequently with Applied Economics Clinic for work in Massachusetts, and I'm going to show you, if we go to the next slide, I'll show you how you can find some of the other work that we've done that's kind of leads up to this report. So to put it in context, we've been working for over a decade on distributed energy storage in Massachusetts, providing technical support for project development, policy and program development, support to the state, stakeholder engagement, independent analysis, such as this. And we do lots of reports, webinars, case studies, conferences, and so forth. Everything's free to download on our website. And what I'm showing here is one of our pages. Excuse me, I have a very annoying cough. I'm showing here one of our pages on the website, which highlights connected solutions, but we have lots and lots of materials. So this report is just the latest in a decade of work to support energy storage in Massachusetts. And next slide, please. So I think we're at the point where we're introducing our speakers. So we're joined today by Tanya Stasio. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's the lead author on the report from Applied Economics Clinic. We also have Samantha Meserve from Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, and Fludd, also from DOER. Elischia is joining just for the question and discussion portion. And of course, I'm moderating, and I'll be back for the question discussion portion as well. I just want to say that we've been working with DOER, Mass CEC, and other agencies in the Commonwealth for, as I said, many years. And this is not meant to be confrontational in any way. We're hoping that this information will support and inform what is a very current and ongoing assessment of these programs within the state, and I'll let Samantha say more about that. So, again, our goal here is to present information, not to be critical, but just to point out areas for improvement. So with that, I will pass the microphone to Tanya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. Hi, everybody. Just give me one moment. I'm going to share my slides. So thank you, everyone, again for joining us to learn a little bit more about this report. Just a reminder, the title of the report is Energy Storage Equity, and it is an assessment of 3 Massachusetts programs. So very quickly, the Applied Economics Clinic is a mission-based nonprofit consulting group that provides services, including analysis, modeling, testimony, public reports, and more in the areas of energy, equity, climate, and environment. We also offer services on a pro bono basis to environmental justice-focused community-based organizations. Primarily, our clients are public interest groups like nonprofits, government agencies, and green business associations. And in our work, we proactively work to support and promote diversity by providing on-the-job learning experiences to graduate students in the form of our research assistant program. So today the presentation is very brief. I just wanted to highlight the main points. There will also be appendix slides provided in the materials that you all will get after the webinar. And as always, you can refer to the report for more information. First, we're going to just set the stage, talk about Massachusetts policies and programs that intend to expand energy storage in the Commonwealth. And then we're going to provide a brief equity assessment of 3 energy storage programs that incentivize storage deployment. And then we're going to talk through a few new and proposed programs in the Commonwealth. And then lastly, we're going to summarize our main findings in terms of the equity provisions in these 3 programs and some recommendations that we have to provide or improve equity performance. So Massachusetts aims to achieve a statewide net zero greenhouse gas emissions target by 2050. And in order to do this, several policies and programs have been implemented to spur renewable energy adoption. For example, electric utilities in the Commonwealth must adhere to requirements established in both the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or the RPS, and the Clean Peak Energy Standard to derive specific amounts of their retail electric sales from clean energy resources. Energy storage systems enable the expansion of these renewable energy resources by supporting Massachusetts in enabling its, in achieving its climate goals. So in 2015, in support of the Commonwealth's clean energy and emissions reduction targets, former Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker launched the Energy Storage Initiative to expand energy storage in the Commonwealth. And as part of that initiative, the Commonwealth set the target of 1,000 megawatt hours of energy storage by the end of 2025. At this point, the Commonwealth is about halfway there. In addition, in 2022, former Governor Baker signed the Act driving clean energy in offshore wind to support the development of both offshore wind, solar power, battery storage, and electrification of the transportation and building sectors. The Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2023 and 2025 lays out a commitment to an equitable clean energy transition. So the Commonwealth is committed to not only meeting its energy storage targets, but also achieving those targets in an equitable manner. Specifically, the CECP presents the Commonwealth's plans to achieve emissions reduction goals for 2025 and 2030, including strategies to promote equity and reduce emissions in overburdened EJ communities. The CECP also emphasizes the importance that all Massachusetts residents can fully access and participate in the transition to a low-carbon economy, and that differences in income level, location, English proficiency, and previous marginalization must not prevent anyone from participating in the benefits created by a new low-carbon economy. So how is Massachusetts achieving these commitments right now? There are a couple of statewide provisions to promote an equitable clean energy transition, including the 2016 Affordable Access to Clean and Efficient Energy Initiative and the 2022 Act Driving Clean Energy in Offshore Wind. That being said, it's also important that any initiatives to support the Commonwealth's clean energy transition are designed equitably, like energy storage programs. This report assesses the equity supporting provisions in 3 statewide programs that specifically facilitate the development of energy storage resources in Massachusetts. So those 3 programs are 1, the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program, or SMART, which supports a variety of solar and storage projects and provides additional incentives and adders for low to moderate income customers. Second, the Clean Peak Energy Standard, which provides certificates to qualifying clean energy generators and energy storage resources that supply electricity to the grid during seasonal peak demand periods, so when electricity consumption is at its highest. And then lastly, the Connected Solutions Program, which allows utilities to provide incentives in exchange for being able to draw on energy stored in customer-sited batteries and/or to curtail or reduce customer energy use to lower the cost of meeting peak electric demand. So I'm sure you all know when energy demand is at its highest, our electricity bills go up. So this program specifically aims to reduce the energy consumption during those peak hours, which then reduces bills. So taking a look at the equity provisions at each of these programs, the heart of this report, we find that the 3 programs lack equity provisions that go above and beyond income eligibility, or in the case of the Clean Peak Energy Standard or Connected Solutions, lack equity provisions altogether. And again, I want to reiterate what Todd had mentioned, that we are not trying to criticize these programs in any way, but rather just provide information on what is happening now and what provisions are currently embedded in these programs and policies. So as it stands, the SMART program is the only program of these 3 that has specific equity provisions. And what we mean by that is that there are specific allocations, targets, metrics that aim to improve the equitability of the program. So what does this look like? In the SMART program, they recently expanded the program to increase the number of low-income eligible customers by expanding the definition of who is a low-income customer to include those in EJ communities. They also require a minimum of, or not require, but set aside a minimum of 5% of total capacity to low-income communities. They also require that projects that serve low-income customers demonstrate that they are providing net savings to that customer. And the incentives that are provided to low-income behind-the-meter units have the highest compensation rate of all the SMART adders. And then lastly, the SMART program adders are differentiated such that low-income communities do receive higher adders. And again, to reiterate, the Clean Peak Energy Standard and the Connected Solutions Program, they do not provide any specific carve-outs or targets or added incentives for low-income or other disadvantaged communities. It's also very difficult to assess those 2 programs because data on program participation is not publicly available and not disaggregated by the type of customer that is enrolled. So taking a closer look at the SMART program data, so this is the one energy storage program that does have equity provisions. However, it does still have very low income participation. So in the SMART program, there are 3 different low income groupings, you could say. There are low income community shared units, so those that are housed on low income properties. And then there are the low income property designation for an individual low income household, and then a low income behind the meter. Those are for those smaller scale units. So between 2018 and 2023, the low income solar plus storage units accounted for only 1.5% of all SMART solar plus storage participating units. So the programs, it's reasonable to assume that the program's low-income offerings are being underutilized in the Commonwealth. So in the next section of the presentation, we're going to talk about new and proposed programs in the Commonwealth. There are a handful of new federally funded programs to support equitable deployment of energy storage in Massachusetts, including a couple of projects that have been funded by the Department of Energy's Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program, which aims to enhance reliability and flexibility of the electric grid. So the first program is the Generac Grid Services Pilot Program, which aims to achieve cost savings for low-income customers through electrification upgrades. There will be about 2,000 income-eligible participants that will receive battery systems from Generac. And the Future Grid project, which is going to be administered by National Grid, was granted $50 million in GRIP funding and aims to deploy digital technology solutions to improve the value of distributed energy resources, specifically in disadvantaged communities. In addition, Open Market ESCO project will provide energy-saving and flexible technologies for underserved communities in Lowell, Massachusetts. So together with multiple partners, including Clean Energy Group, this project was awarded $6.56 million to improve energy efficiency in up to 20 underserved low to moderate income renter communities in Lowell. This represents about 2,000 homes. And the project aims to achieve energy savings of about 30% by retrofitting homes to install and manage battery storage, renewable generation, efficiency, and demand response technologies. At the state level, Massachusetts has also applied for funding through the US EPA Solar for All competition and the National Clean Investment Fund. In June 2023, the EPA launched the Solar for All competition, and it was awarded $7 billion to provide to projects that seek to expand residential solar energy in low-income and affordable communities. And in October 2023, Mass CEC, Mass Housing, Boston Housing Authority, and DOER submitted a $250 $50 million proposal to the Solar for All program to make clean energy investments in up to 48,500 low-income and affordable homes. Massachusetts has also sorry about that, we're continuing from the last slide. Moreover, in July 2023, the US EPA announced the $14 billion National Clean Investment Fund, where 20% of the funds are dedicated to distributed energy generation and storage. The Massachusetts Community Climate Bank has submitted a proposal to the NCIF that would fund decarbonization measures for an additional 28,000 affordable renter homes over the next 5 years. So again, not all of these programs and initiatives are specific to storage, but they do enable energy storage investments. Lastly, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center Innovate Mass program provides grant funding and technical support. Innovate Mass provides funding to projects that support the deployment of new and innovative clean energy technologies that address the Commonwealth's energy challenges. So, for example, in 2020, a almost $200,000 Innovate Mass grant was allocated to fund a solar and storage program in Norwood, Massachusetts. The program was administered by Alternative Power Source and will provide small home battery and solar PV systems to residential customers in Norwood, including 15 LMI customers that have critical home health needs that will receive larger batteries for longer duration backup power. Clean Energy Group has provided a small additional grant to support expanded resilience for the 15 LMI customers. Finally, going into the main findings and recommendations of our report, our assessment of the 3 energy storage programs yields 5 main findings. Firstly, we find that the 3 energy storage programs lack mandates, targets, and reporting requirements that would support the Commonwealth's commitment to equitable access to clean and efficient energy. The connected solutions and Clean Peak Standard in particular do not have any equity provisions or reporting on equity participation. You cannot find out how many low-income customers are participating in these programs. You cannot find out how many EJ households are participating in these programs. In addition, the low-income participation in the SMART program, while we are able to assess it with online publicly accessible data, is minimal, even after the program was revised to improve equity participation by expanding the low-income definition. Moreover, the SMART program lacks specific incentives for vulnerable populations outside of that income eligibility definition. Lastly, the Cape Light Compact and Generac programs have, both of those entities have initiated 2 equity-focused customer energy storage programs in the Commonwealth. And while these 2 programs are very small, they're constrained in scale and budget, they provide good examples or models for Massachusetts agencies and utilities to apply in their own programs. We make 8 total recommendations for Massachusetts programs to improve their equity performance, 3 of which involve establishing metrics to set targets, track progress, and ensure community involvement. So very briefly summarizing our first recommendation, we believe that the Commonwealth should require participation data for energy storage programs to be publicly available online with detailed information so that the equity participation is able to be assessed. Secondly, we recommend that the Commonwealth develop specific income eligible enrollment and capacity targets and require detailed data on the progress towards these targets. And then thirdly, we recommend that the Commonwealth create a stakeholder-informed outreach and enrollment plan for addressing low participation in EJ and/or low-income areas, and launch targeted utility, EJ community, and low-income customer outreach and education programs. Our last 5 recommendations aim to expand there's a typo there, 5 of which aim to expand and increase existing equity incentives. Firstly, we recommend that the Clean Peak Energy Standard have a financial incentive for providing clean peak energy resources in income eligible areas. Similarly, we recommend an increase in the incentive rates for income eligible customers enrolled in the Connected Solutions and SMART programs, and offer upfront rebates to increase low income participation. Next, we recommend that the Commonwealth add financial incentives for other vulnerable households, such as those that rely on uninterrupted electric supply to power life-saving medical devices in critical facilities. Seventh, add an additional smart resiliency adder for sustainable community microgrids that serve state designated EJ communities and/or low-income households. And then lastly, add an additional smart fossil fuel replacement adder for the smart solar plus storage units installed to replace existing fossil fuel plants located within Massachusetts EJ communities. And all of these recommendations aim to improve the equity performance and outcomes from Massachusetts programs in order to ensure a more equitable clean energy transition. And that is the end of my slides. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Tanya. And we're going to go ahead and go on and have Samantha from DOER present, and then we will start going through questions and discussion. We do have a few questions, but not many at this point. So if you have ideas or you didn't understand something or you want to know more, please do type those questions in because we are going to have some time to talk about them. And Samantha, pass the baton to you.
Great, thanks, Todd, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today talking about the work that DOER is doing. There's a lot to do to meet our 2050 Global Warming Solutions Act mandates, and having stakeholders that are willing to do work to help identify where at DOER we can improve our practices, particularly when it comes to things that are really important to our team and the administration, like equity. It's really invaluable. So, I first want to just start off by saying we really appreciate the work that's been done here, and it's been really informative for me and my team to review and figure out, where can we start to try and make some of these improvements in some of our programs. So I really wanted to join you all today just to talk about a couple things that DOER is doing, particularly as it relates to equity in the programs that were included in this report. So we're at a great time to be receiving this feedback. It's always really helpful when we're reviewing programs and feedback can align with those review processes. So I wanted to provide here just a couple quick links. The slides will be shared after the presentation that link to ongoing programmatic reviews for the CPS program, the SMART program, and also the 3-year plan and connected solutions programs. It's really valuable to have stakeholder engagement in these processes, particularly when it comes to equity related matters. We really have to rely on our stakeholders in order to get the inside scoop and what's happening on the ground in order to make sure that our programs are based in reality. So in particular, going through those recommendations, it seems like they are really surrounding the incentive levels and the metrics. And in all 3 of those programs, those are things that we are able to evaluate. So, I'm going to be tasking my team internally to be reviewing this report and figuring out where can we start to move the needle on some of these equity recommendations, but also just wanted to provide the information and opportunity for those interested where we can continue these conversations on equity in DOER's programs. Additionally, I just wanted to touch on a few other work streams that we're doing right now at DOER. We are moving forward with a $50 million energy storage grant program. That program is going to have an element of resiliency, which really is going to be focused on how do we retire peaker plants, support our grid, make sure we're supporting our most vulnerable communities. And so I'm really excited, that program is going to be supported by a program administrator who's going to be doing a lot of stakeholdering to set up that program. And this report is going to be a great deliverable that we'll be able to pass off to help make sure that as that program is coming to fruition, the equity recommendations that have been put forth by, this group and also other stakeholder entities are really taken seriously and incorporated into that program. And additionally, I just wanted to touch quickly on some of the siting work that DOER is working on. Siting is one of the biggest impacts on EJ communities when it comes to renewable energy infrastructure. And we know that, Massachusetts communities have a wide range of bandwidth and capabilities to be doing thoughtful renewable energy siting in their communities. Western Mass communities, southeastern Massachusetts communities. Some of them are very rural. They have maybe one staff person that works part-time to support the community. They don't have all of the sustainability managers and all of that bandwidth to be helping to understand how renewable energy siting is impacting their borders. And so we're going to be working at DOER, coming out of the Clean Energy Infrastructure Siting and Permitting Commission, to work to set up some more resources at DOER, specifically as it pertains to siting and permitting and municipalities, because we know Massachusetts is a home rule state. Municipalities are, one of the most important players when it comes to renewable energy siting, and it's really DOER's main objective to be able to support them. So very quickly, just wanted to provide these updates. I think even more importantly than the topical work that we're doing, I wanted to provide an introduction to DOER's new environmental justice senior lead, Elischia Fludd. She is really creating immense change within DOER when it comes to environmental justice and equity work. This is her tagline that she asked me to put out to you all, driving agency-wide progress on environmental justice through strategic interagency collaborations and public engagement. We have not had someone at DOER solely focused on environmental justice and equity before, and I feel really excited about the bandwidth and the additional capabilities that Elischia is bringing to the team. And I know that she's really excited she's actually on the line today and is going to be joining us for questions. And she's really excited to be able to engage with DOER stakeholders as well. So wanted to provide an introduction to her and also provide her and I's contact information. We're always interested in hearing from stakeholders, whether it's a quick email, a call, time to set up to talk through these issues, we really can't express how valuable we find that feedback. And so, wanted to be here today to just say we appreciate the work that you all are doing, and we're really interested, to see that work continue. And, our doors are open to continue that collaboration. So I'll pause there. Happy to get to questions. And again, just really want to appreciate the time you all have committed and the work that was done here. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much. If we can get everybody back up on camera, Elischia and Tanya, and we do have a good number of questions now, so this is great. Thank you so much for your presentations, and let's see how many of these questions we can get to. So somebody wants to know, are there any equity recommendations or considerations to include in utility scale storage procurement programs? So I should note that Clean Peak Standard is utility focused as a program. We did make recommendations that there be some kind of equity component in that program. There's no reason as a concept that utility procurement can't have equity components in it. In fact, New York State just recently came out with a set of guidelines for their energy storage procurement program, saying that I think it's 35% of that program needs to be focused on low-income and underserved communities, and they specified specific areas in zones in the state to focus that carve out on. So that gives one example, but I'm going to pass this back over to our other speakers. So the question is, are there any equity recommendations or considerations for utility scale storage procurement in Massachusetts?
I'm happy
If
to
anybody wants
speak quickly
to
to that one. Yeah, we're still in the early stages of developing those procurements, but equity in EJ is going to be an element that we are considering as we move forward with those procurements. I also think working with communities is going to be really important in those procurements, because we know that environmental justice communities have been overburdened by their share of energy infrastructure. And so while someone like me who loves clean energy and loves to nerd out about it, thinks that having clean energy sited in a community is always a good thing, that's not necessarily the case. There could be communities that still feel that they don't have the ability to bear the burden of energy infrastructure, and it's our responsibility to work with them and to figure out how we can bring them with us to our 2050 outlook. And so I want to say yes, we're definitely committed to including EJ and equity in those procurements. But I just wanted to add that context, because I don't want entities to think that means that, that's going to be furthering to push energy infrastructure on our vulnerable population. So definitely thinking about it. And we have Elischia on board now, which is great. And so sometimes processes that get delayed, it works out for the best, because we're going to have a lot of extra bandwidth to help us. I think the key piece is strategically think about equity and environmental justice in our policies.
And if I may add on to that, what Samantha is saying is really key, because part of the conversation has to include language access and making sure that people in different communities are really understanding and have informed decision making, so that when they're able to comment on these kinds of things, they're coming from a place that is highly informed, rather than just sort of being around and providing some of their lived experience. And one of the things that I would like to sort of double down on is that in trying to get stakeholders involved in some of this planning, I would just like to invite people to not discount lived experience in this. And so if you're a person listening to this and you think that you just like you don't know anything about this, you haven't been formally trained on it, I say to continue to think about reaching out, and certainly use my email in the process, and let me know if you have any language access needs so we can get that going.
Great, thank you both. I want to drill down a little bit more on this, though, before we go to the next question. So We did make a recommendation about the Clean Peak Standard, but that is only a program that only addresses those narrow peak periods, peak demand periods. Massachusetts has, of course, an energy storage procurement target for its regulated utilities that specifies a certain amount of storage needs to be procured by those utilities by a certain date. We didn't address that in this report, but is there any reason that the Commonwealth could not include some kind of equity target or requirement or carve out or something in that larger procurement, energy storage procurement target? Now, it's not a mandate, it's a aspirational target, I recognize that. But is there something stopping the Commonwealth from saying, when you're going out and procuring energy storage utilities, you should be making sure that you make some investments in underserved communities, and not necessarily to put, again, not to force unwanted infrastructure in communities, but to say, if there's a developer, if there's a community owned resource, for example, you could procure storage services there.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, the first thing I want to point out is our energy storage initiative targets 1,000 megawatt hours by 2025. That's not a utility procurement. So that's just a Commonwealth-wide target. So we're looking at what's being installed under the Clean Peak program, what's being installed as part of the SMART program, what's being installed, just in general by the, within the utility service territory. So I just wanted to flag that because right now, we don't have that procurement mechanism that would allow us to include those equity elements. With that being said, we do have the procurement under the Clean Peak program. We also know that there are some ongoing discussions with the legislature and the governor looking towards directing the utility companies to do larger energy storage procurements. Should those larger energy storage procurements move forward, yes, I think equity and environmental justice is definitely going to be centered in those. I think when we're thinking about energy storage, it is a different type of thinking when we think through how are the benefits flowing to customers, right? When you're thinking about renewable energy generation, so let's take solar energy, right? The person that's installing the solar, that's getting the net metering credits, they're the ones that are really getting the large majority of that benefit. And then there's some ancillary benefits to the grid and clean power. When we're thinking about storage, in most cases, we have, residential storage, and that provides a lot of value. So when we're talking about how can we build resiliency, how can we make sure that, customers have support, in particular, if people have healthcare needs and they have equipment and they can't weather outages, right? How do we make sure that we're supporting those entities? But in general, when we're thinking about the energy storage we're going to need on the grid in 2050, a lot of it is larger standalone storage. And so how do we think about the benefits of those, right? Because where you need to site an energy storage facility in order to most benefit an environmental justice population might not be in that environmental justice population. It might be, somewhere else on the grid where there's a bottleneck that then is flowing to that environmental justice population. So there's all of these different ways we need to be thinking about energy storage and equity when it comes to developing larger programs like that. And so, we're really thinking about those things and, thinking about how do we, really make sure the benefits are meeting where the people that deserve them and need them the most are. And that might look different in an energy storage procurement than it does in the CPS program, than the SMART program. And so, we're really interested in stakeholders' perspective on that, right? Because we have our internal perspective, but that's only one very small part of the picture. And so, as we're going to be going out to develop these procurements, to be developing our energy storage grant program, we really want to be implementing, putting out straw proposals, collecting stakeholder feedback, integrating that feedback into the proposals we're putting out. And that's what I would expect any procurement process and our energy storage grant process to look like in probably 2025, if I'm reading the tea leaves, but totally 100,000% subject to change. But I think it's really exciting that, again, I'm going to keep singing Elischia's praises because I'm so happy to have her, because she adds such a great level of bandwidth and expertise on this stuff. And I'm really excited to be able to be doing that work on these new programs, because I think it's really important and it's necessary, and it's coming a little too late, but we can still start now and have a lot of positive outcomes.
Great, thank you. By the way, I was just talking to a colleague the other day about possibly doing a report on community solar and storage. So keep an eye out if you're interested. So next question, how should finite pools of money objectively be prioritized across low-income communities, critical community facilities, and resilience? So I think this gets at, how do you decide, we have infinite resources, so how do you kind of allocate those resources?
I can go first with my very subjective take, and then you all can feel free to chime in. So of course we have limited amounts of money, and we cannot give everybody all of the money that we have at the same time. But it's really, again, about equity. It's about providing funds to those that need it most, and providing shares that account for that. So, we all talk about, systemic inequities and marginalized communities and communities that have already bared the brunt of climate change impacts, as well as environmental hazards in the Commonwealth. So we want to make sure that we are, first and foremost, acknowledging those communities and acknowledging these disparities, but then also trying to incorporate those in, like we talk about here, in our policies and programs. And when it comes to the specific breakdown of those amounts, I can't tell you exactly, 20% should go to low-income customers or anything like that. What we're trying to sort of focus on here is that there aren't any requirements right now for prioritizing these communities. And beyond the SMART program, which provides a financial incentive, there aren't any targets or performance metrics to make sure that the SMART program is advancing equity outcomes in the Commonwealth. And I'll pass it on to you all if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'd like to add something here. In terms of trying to think about how to prioritize communities, one of the things that is important to think about with environmental justice is that it focuses first on historically underserved communities, right? And so if you start there and really overlay it with sort of climate impacts, public health impacts, even if you want to look at employment, because that all factors in to some of the experiences that people have, particularly because even if you want to directly address poverty through those mechanisms, poverty is multidimensional, and so you can't just look at income, you can't just look at health outcomes, for example, but there's lots of things that we already know. I also come from sort of looking at things from an international background, so I always look at what the international community is doing, and then try to dwindle it down into what's happening nationally and then on a local basis. And so there's lots of information floating everywhere about sort of adverse impacts with health. And if you overlay that with those historically underserved and underdeveloped communities, that gives you a first view of how you can handle looking at an overburdened population. And then I think you spiral out from there, right? And that's important because a lot of conversations that even I'm in, sometimes I hear people talk about EJ communities as sort of like a rolling basis, and that's important. It does happen that way, but you can't sort of take the most recent additions to that and then service them first because it's foremost of mind or it's easiest to get to, because that's reinforcing part of the problem. We're supposed to be addressing the structural barriers that have made these things an issue today.
Thank you. Somebody is asking, did you consider some equity, well, commercial, not just residential, equity incentives in dirty peaker plant adjacent communities for commercial storage use to eliminate peakers? I'm going to just interject here that CEG has a whole program on replacing dirty fossil fuel peaker plants with energy storage and clean renewables. It's called Phase Out Peakers, and you should go to our website if you're interested in that. And we are working with community organizations in Massachusetts as well as several other states on providing analysis and support and advocacy on that question. And I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, but I just want to mention one other thing. For those who aren't aware of what a peaker plant is, it's a usually relatively small generation plant, traditionally natural gas, or sometimes they burn oil or they burn other things. And its role really is to meet the few hours of peak electricity demand every year. So they run very seldom, and a lot of them only run 5 or 7% of the hours of the year, but they get paid a whole lot of money to sit there and be ready to run as sort of an insurance policy against blackouts in case there's a sudden spike in demand or some big generator goes offline unexpectedly. So peaker plants, the other issue with peakers is that they are often sited in close to load, which means in urban communities, often in low-income communities, where they cause human health impacts, because they not only provide electricity, but they also release air pollutants that cause asthma and heart disease and all kinds of other negative health impacts. So with that background, I will pass this over to Samantha and Elischia and Tanya for comment.
I can go first and just speak on the report's parameters. So we do have that last recommendation, which is to add a smart adder that incentivizes fossil fuel replacement, specifically in EJ communities, which would indirectly also pertain to any fossil fuel peaker facilities. But we did not have any specific recommendations for, retiring or reducing the need for those peaker facilities. But I do want to emphasize that energy storage supports renewable energy deployment. Renewable energy deployment reduces the need for those fossil fuel facilities, and therefore the need for those peaking facilities to curb excess demand during those peak times. And especially with energy storage, and specifically behind the meter energy storage, it provides a lot more power to communities to have, on-site storage and renewable generation units, so that if the power does go out, if we do have an emergency event, that they have backup power and backup stored energy on site to provide energy to their home, rather than having to rely on the grid and rely on those peaking facilities.
Yeah, I think, we definitely intend in our energy storage grants to be including environmental justice and equity provisions when we're, soliciting proposals for projects. One of the elements of that program is specifically to be retiring peaker plants, and so it definitely is our objective. I think internally we think a lot about, what tools we have available and what tools will create the best outcomes. And so, the challenge with incentivizing energy storage and smart is that the incentive is given on the solar production. So if you have a solar system paired with a battery, there's no way for us to actually incentivize the behavior we want to see coming out of that battery in the smart program, because the dollar doesn't follow the actual behavior, it follows the solar behavior. And so, that's a situation where, internally we are thinking through, okay, we love the SMART program. I think it's a lot of participation. We see a lot of projects that are being paired with storage. Does an adder driving projects to a location make sense? But then also, how do we guarantee that then that project is providing benefits, right? Because that project could be incentivized and then not operational, right? And so, we're thinking on the DOER side, practically, how do we not only incentivize these projects, but how do we make sure they're actually doing what they said that they're doing and what they're being paid for? Because that's ratepayer money. And so, our team feels really strongly about protecting ratepayers and making sure that they're getting what their dollars are being used for. And so that sometimes does put us into a situation where using what we have available doesn't always result in the best outcomes. But we need to be moving the needle, right? And so, would love to think through, how we can maybe achieve what we're trying to get, which is more resiliency, more energy storage in environmental justice populations in a way that utilizes the tools we have, but also creates the outcome that we want and guarantees that outcome so that there's not any risk of wasted ratepayer dollars. So we're evaluating the SMART program, and I can tell you that this is the conversation that we're having every day internally, is how do we strike that balance between, wanting to make sure we're incentivizing, what's coming out of the program, but also recognizing that we can't miss the opportunity to be pairing renewables with storage. There's so much inherent value there. So, you know, would love stakeholder ideas. This is just going to continue to be, I think, my call for participation in our processes. I always say if you don't like something that we've put out, that's usually our best idea. And so, we're always open to other alternatives, other solutions. Again, I can't express enough that, you all on this webinar are the ones that are doing the work and are in the communities and are citing the projects. And so the expertise that we get from our stakeholders, it's really, valuable to us. So just wanted some context there, but also to put a plug that we are looking at the CPS and SMART programs right now. And so, other ideas that might be coming up for stakeholders, we would love to hear about those as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Clean Peak Standard really is about engaging clean resources to supply that peaking power need, which has been traditionally supplied by fossil fuel peakers. So in a roundabout way, it's not roundabout, it's a direct way, but that isn't the same as saying, look, these 5 peakers are going to go offline and retire. Let's figure out how to incentivize or require or otherwise support some battery storage or other kinds of, compared with renewables or what have you, in that location, because there are locational benefits as well as system-wide benefits to the peakers, right? And sometimes you need that resource in a certain location. So we looked at this recently in Maine, and actually, if you go to our website, we have a recent report out on this, where we basically looked at the fleet of fossil fuel peakers in Maine, selected 3 or 4 of them that are slated for retirement or looking like they're going to retire. They're very old plants, and they run seldom. And then compared the cost for replacing those with battery storage versus replacing those with new gas peakers. And if you count the cost of local air emissions, like sulfur and nitrogen oxides, which cause things like asthma and acid rain and all kinds of negative impacts on the environment and on human health. If you include those costs, then batteries are actually a cheaper replacement than a new gas plant. So, and that holds true across the New England area, because that relies on the capacity market for revenues. And so that capacity market applies to all the states in New England. So, I think it's great that there are some programs that are focusing storage and renewables on peak hours. I mean, essentially, Connected Solutions does this too, right? That's the sort of the point. But the question really was about replacing fossil fuel peakers. And I don't know if anyone was on there was a webinar just this morning, Massachusetts Department of what was it? Energy Transformation
Resources?
or something like that.
Oh, sorry.
And they basically show, it was E3 was doing a presentation, and they showed that the peaks are going to get higher and higher and higher. Peak demand is going up, especially in the winters when you switch over to when you start electrifying and everybody switches over to electric heating. So it's going to be an issue. And if so I guess I'll just throw it back to you again for just a brief second round here. Is there any way to more directly target clean resources at those dirty peakers as they start to phase out?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think it starts with information, right? It's getting a handle on where are those peakers, where are they having the biggest impact. But I do want to push back a little bit on the idea that a positive equity outcome would be that you retire those peakers and you replace it with energy storage, because again, that feels like something that is happening to the community, right? You're saying, okay, well, we gave you peakers and now they're retiring and we have this space and it makes sense. So we're going to take out the peakers and we're going to give you energy storage. I love energy storage. I think energy storage has a ton of benefits. But if we're really trying to have a just transition, then that means that we can't just tell communities that, okay, we're going to switch this out and give you the latest technology. We need to call them into our conversations. We need to say, hey, you have this location, these peaker plants are retiring. Here's why we think it would be really valuable to you and your community to site energy storage here. Right? And if they say, look, we don't have a park in our community, it is more important to our residents that they have green space, we would actually like to use this space for a park, then it's our responsibility to say, okay, knowing now that perspective from the community, where then do we put the energy storage? How then do we achieve the outcome while working with the community to hear their needs and not just telling them, you should have energy storage, we're going to put it here, right? So I think that it starts with information. So Todd, would love to connect with you more about your peaker work, because again, I love utilizing the work of other people because there's too much work for us to do. So I always take advantage of that. And I think it's, as we're thinking through those grant opportunities, right, it's how do you structure those grant opportunities so that when applications are coming in, we want to put an energy storage system here. We've collaborated with the town. We've worked with our EJ partners. We have broad support for this project and the benefits it's going to provide. And you weighing that against other projects and saying, look, we have two projects. They both maybe provide equal environmental benefits or emissions benefits to the grid, but this one is being supported by the community and the community is backing it. And this one has community opposition because the community doesn't feel engaged in that process. They don't feel heard. It's not what they're asking for. And so then we have to be able to say, okay, the community's voice is what's going to push that project forward. And that's the projects that we want to be supporting. So, I think a lot of that it's educating communities. It's doing some of the municipal work that we at DOER are really just at the precipice of doing. It's helping to educate municipal officials, providing resources, providing assistance, understanding that municipalities have so much that they're working on for their residents. How do we help make it a little bit easier in this area? And how do we really listen to the community and be doing, a community first approach when it comes to siting of infrastructure? We won't always get it 100% right, but it's listening, learning, doing better next time.
I just
I
wanted
totally
to
agree.
add on to that. Oh, sorry, Elischia, do you want to go first? Oh, okay. I completely agree with the community-centered approach, and especially with the idea of presenting alternative options for replacing an existing peaker. And I just wanted to flag that we are actually working internally on behalf of the Berkshire Environmental Action Team to review all of Massachusetts' existing peakers and also talk about examples across the US, as well as at least one example in Massachusetts where a peaking facility has been retired either in part or in whole and replaced by an energy storage or clean energy facility. But I want to reiterate that it's the community should be first, as Samantha had noted, and that the community should be consulted about these decisions and not just, handed this solution without being talked to first.
So the only thing that I would add here, because I agree totally with what Samantha and Tanya was saying, is that part of it is education for communities, as in share the scientific information that and how we are thinking about these things, and also looking at things like the way land is currently used and whether or not there's thresholds that need to be kept in mind to be able to have things go forward sustainably and to future generations. But also the community can be leveraged for knowledge share and also participatory sort of research and things like that, to the extent that people are curious about it and want to, but they should also be compensated for their time and their expertise.
So this has been a great discussion. I just want to say we completely agree. I think we're all in agreement here. We are not advocating foisting new technologies or any technologies on communities. I think the issue is that we're working with groups in communities where plants are being relicensed or replaced with new plants, or where they're really, the communities don't want that. And the other part of this that I just want to point out is that those peaking services can be provided from behind the meter as well as in front of it. And that's sort of the point of some of these programs like Connected Solutions. And so there's no reason that you have to replace one big facility with another big facility. You can in fact replace one big facility with 1,000, distributed behind the meter small resources. The last thing I want to say, we are out of time. the webinar this morning I was referencing was from the Office of Energy Transformation, and one of our attendees here is asking whether DOER is in conversation with the Office of Energy Transformation. I'm assuming that you are, and mentioning that they're establishing a focus area working group on decarbonizing peak electric generation power plants, and also that energy storage grants could be useful to host communities in helping to facilitate that. So we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you to all of you. Thank you to everybody who attended. And I will turn it over to Zareen for any last remarks.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming. We've got a couple of webinars coming up. You can see them on our screen here, and if you'd like to register for them, you can go to cleanegroup.org/webinars. Again, we will be sending a recording of this webinar within 48 hours to everyone who attended. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.